Let us set the scene. The year is 1902. The place is Cambridge, Massachusetts. Smallpox is not a theoretical threat here. It is a terrifying, disfiguring reality. It carries a mortality rate of nearly 30% for the unvaccinated, and those who survive are often left blind or deeply scarred. The city is on edge. In response to a rising outbreak, the Cambridge Board of Health issues a municipal order. The order requires all adults to be vaccinated against smallpox. If you refuse, you must pay a fine of $5. Now, $5 in 1902 is roughly equivalent to $150 today. It was not a life-ruining sum, but it was significant. The city argued that this was a necessary police measure to stop the chain of transmission. They viewed the unvaccinated body not just as a personal risk, but as a loaded weapon pointed at the community. Enter Henning Jacobson. Jacobson was a Swedish immigrant and a pastor. He was not an anarchist. He was a man of conviction. He refused the vaccine, and he refused to pay the fine. His reasoning was personal. He claimed that he and his son had previously suffered severe adverse reactions to vaccinations in Sweden. He feared that the vaccine would damage his health, but when he took his fight to court, he didn't just argue for a medical exemption, he made a constitutional argument. He invoked the 14th Amendment, arguing that the mandate violated his liberty rights. He essentially claimed that his body was his own sovereign territory, and the state had no power to invade it with a medical procedure, regardless of the public benefit. He was drawing a line in the sand regarding bodily integrity. The case climbed all the way to the Supreme Court. The question before the justices was profound. Does the Constitution's guarantee of liberty give a citizen the absolute right to be wholly free from restraint? Jacobson's lawyers argued that if the state can force a needle into your arm, there is no limit to what they can do to your person. They painted the mandate as a form of assault. The state of Massachusetts countered by citing the police power, the inherent authority of a sovereign government to enact laws to protect the health, safety, and morals of the people. They argued that a citizen cannot claim a liberty interest that actively endangers their neighbors. This was a clash between two fundamental American values, individual autonomy and collective security. In 1905, the court delivered a 7-2 decision that shattered the idea of absolute personal autonomy. Justice John Marshall Harlan wrote the majority opinion, and it is a masterpiece of legal philosophy. Harlan wrote that liberty is not an absolute right to be wholly freed from restraint. He argued that in any organized society, we are all subject to manifold restraints for the common good. He stated that if every person did exactly as they pleased, without regard for the injury done to others, real liberty could not exist. It would be anarchy. Harlan effectively codified the social contract into public health law. By living in a community, you implicitly agree to limit your freedom when your actions, or in this case, your infection status, pose a direct threat to the safety of the group. Harlan used a powerful analogy to drive his point home. He compared the vaccine mandate to the military draft. He argued that a person cannot refuse to be drafted when the nation is at war, even if they fear death on the battlefield. The safety of the republic requires their service. Similarly, he argued, a person cannot refuse to protect the community against an epidemic of disease which threatens the safety of its members. The court ruled that your personal belief, however sincere, cannot override the state's duty to prevent a plague. The community has a right to self-preservation that is higher than the individual's right to bodily integrity in that specific context. This ruling established that public health powers are vast, but as we will see, they are not unlimited. While Jacobson gave the state power, it didn't write a blank check. Legal scholars, most notably Lawrence Gostin, have derived 4 critical standards from the ruling that serve as a checklist for the ethical use of power. The first is necessity. The state cannot restrict liberty on a whim or for a minor nuisance. There must be a demonstrable, active threat, like a deadly epidemic. Speculation is not enough. The second is reasonable means. The intervention chosen must actually work. There must be a scientific relationship between the mandate and the goal. For example, you cannot mandate a vaccine that doesn't stop transmission, or a quarantine that lasts longer than the incubation period. If the means don't achieve the end, the infringement on liberty is unconstitutional. The third standard is proportionality. This is the idea that the punishment or restriction must fit the crime. You do not burn down a house to kill a rat. A $5 fine was considered proportional to the threat of smallpox. Imprisoning someone for life for refusing a vaccine would likely be disproportionate. The state must balance the public benefit against the individual burden. The fourth standard is harm avoidance. Harlan acknowledged that if a person could prove that the vaccine would likely kill them due to a unique medical condition, the mandate would become cruel and inhuman. This created the legal basis for medical exemptions. The state cannot force you to commit suicide for the public good. There is a floor of humanity below which the law cannot drop. How do we see Jacobson applied today? The most common application is in our school systems. In 1922, the case Zucht v. King expanded Jacobson to allow schools to deny admission to unvaccinated children. This marked a shift in strategy from fines to exclusion. Instead of the police coming to your door to collect $5, the state simply says, if you do not comply, you cannot participate in this public benefit. You cannot attend public school. This is considered a constitutional exercise of police power because the school environment is a high-risk setting for transmission. The state is not forcing the needle into the child. It is setting a safety standard for entry into a communal space. This brings us to the modern problem of the free rider. The free rider is the person who benefits from herd immunity, staying safe because everyone around them took the risk of vaccination, while refusing to participate themselves. Jacobson essentially ruled that the Constitution does not protect free riding when the public health is at stake. While many states have granted religious or philosophical exemptions over the last century, those are political gifts, not constitutional rights. As we saw in recent years with measles outbreaks, states like New York and California have revoked those exemptions. The courts have consistently upheld those revocations, citing Jacobson. The logic remains, your right to religious expression does not include the right to become a vector of disease in a classroom. To conclude Lesson 1, Jacobson v. Massachusetts teaches us that liberty is not solitude. We live in a web of mutual biological vulnerability. The state has the authority to police that vulnerability, but that authority requires responsibility. It must be necessary, reasonable, proportional, and humane. As we move into Lesson 2, we will take these legal standards and expand them into a broader ethical framework known as the justificatory conditions. We will ask not just what is legal, but what is right. I want you to keep the image of Henning Jacobson in your mind, a man fighting for his autonomy against the state fighting for its survival. That tension never goes away, it just changes shape.